Hello, I'm Derek Arden, and welcome to Monday Night Live and Uncut podcast, where we have leaders, regular leaders, experts in the industries that they are involved in. Tonight I've got Alan McCulloch. Let me tell you a little bit about Alan. He's from Manchester. He worked in Hong Kong for a number of years doing big projects for the firm he worked for. Then he did a big shopping centre in Warrington and then worked in London for 13 years. He's a local architect now doing lots of work round and about in the Guildford area. Alan, welcome to Monday Night Live. Give us a quick snapshot of your life and what you do.
Well, obviously, former times worked on larger projects in different parts of the world, but predominantly residential projects is what I'm engaged with, which is very interesting. Just as interesting as large projects, just different scale. Taken through, typically starting a project, no surprise, you should have a good project brief, and I'll spend as long as it takes to get a project brief right, because particularly if you're talking about a family or a person who wants to deliver some change in either the house they live in or a house they've bought or a house they're developing, it takes a bit of a time to tease out a really complete brief, because what you can't do in doing a design, you can't have half the answer going with something that doesn't fit together. So you've got to test. You can't say, well, the clock's ticking, the meter's running, just keep talking, because people won't. So I wait till I get what I consider to be a brief I can work to, not necessarily how I would do it. It could be how a particular person wants to end up and reasons why. But I need to know the reasons why, and so I can actually deliver. Because you can't, unless you have a brief, you can't meet it. So,
Well,
long-winded.
Alan, you ask quite direct questions, don't you, when you go in there? You told me about husband and wife. You're never sure who the decision maker is, and you don't want to have to change everything because the wife agrees, and then the husband won't pay for it.
Well, the reason I want to get a correct answer is because it's so time consuming to get to a place, almost think he's got it right, and then they say, oh, I forgot to tell you, or oh, my husband or wife has decided against that, when actually, if you teased it out properly, you would know they wouldn't want to do that anyway. So, you're right, it's reading the room in terms of, you can just tell the body language is who's keen and who's not keen. So I like to feed off that, as we talked about before. So getting the right brief, and then you've got to deal with realistic outcomes, because I'm not afraid to say, for example, if they've got a tiny house and they want to make a massive house with extensions, and you add 3 new bedrooms, but you still got the pokey little hall, pokey little staircase, and I say it doesn't look right. Your resale won't work, because it will look like a sort of small house on steroids, but not very elegant. So that's another thing that I pick up on, really. So, and there's all these programs on TV about grand designs, etc. The expectation of everybody is so huge, but those programs, they do focus on extremes, and they focus on problems. Actually, they quite like to show schemes which have gone wrong, which I'm not particularly happy about going wrong on projects. So that's project brief is important. Then the actual proposals, the process, just for simplicity, is as you might imagine. You need a preliminary design. Basically, I'll get a brief, and then I'll come up with a complete design, but in sketch form, and I'll go through that completely, and if they're not going to like it, I'd rather know soon, so that I don't spend a whole lot of time working on detail when I can't, when it isn't going to the right end. So, getting realistic outcomes, but of course, it's not all within the gift of an architect, because it could be in a site which could be a listed building, it could be in a conservation area, it could be overdeveloped already, and there really isn't, even though the people love that particular road, that particular part of that road and their neighbors, it's just not possible with some houses to make it elegantly become a bigger house. Or I haven't heard of many people wanting smaller houses, actually, come to think of it.
Alan, do you want to show us this barn conversion you've been working on now? Shall we go there?
Okay. This is something very interesting. A really nice couple who've got a disabled daughter. That's the last slide, Terry.
Okay, let's we'll go back to
right. So this is an overview, and the barn is in that. It's I don't know if you can use the cursor. Oh, I can. So can you see that?
Oh, I can use the cursor. I don't know if you can. I can put you on. I can put you on.
That's the barn we're talking about. Probably go on to the next slide anyway. So it's a very, very typical barn, but it's 27 meters long by 7 meters wide. So it's actually not that typical in terms of size. It's not really, if you convert it all into a house, it's a very big property. But they have a property, and they want to convert a third of that, roughly a third, into a self-contained disability compliant. In fact, they want the whole barn to be disability compliant, but one half of it, third of it, they want to be for their daughter, who's become 25. And apparently when you're 25, nobody in the local authority wants to care for you anymore. You have to look after yourself. So if you go to the next one.
Coming up, Alan. Yep, coming up.
Yeah. So this is on the left is the ground plan, which is, say the top third is a disabled unit, all the usual things, but very large wet room, and lots of space around things so that a wheelchair gets around very well. A central double height volume, which must look double height, and then a guest suite on the end. The plan on the right is just the upper floor, which sits over the completely free barn on the left. So it's quite interesting. If you go on to the next slide. So the section is very important because it's quite hard to. It's quite an old barn, and it's not designed to take additional loads or big windows in the roof and things like that. So we're basically having to build a subframe in the middle of it, underneath the skin, strengthen all the roof, drop the existing ceiling a little bit so that we can get a living roof, we can get some accommodation upstairs, and drop the slab, which just about works in terms of the relationship with the lane outside, and just with very small ramps. So it's quite a big engineering solution, but the client, and I have, as I said, brief-wise, I have checked that he really wants to do this, because it's not a small amount of money, that's for sure. So the next one, it's just the planning context. You can see at the top there, it fits in with the garden and then his bigger house, and it's in the middle of a farm. This he's a really good chap, barrister, who took up farming 30 years ago. So what's that all about? And then sorry for cricking your neck. So that's the elevations. The one on the left is basically the new appearance to the lane, which is supposed to be very modest, because it's supposed to be modest. And then the one on the right is heavily glazed, because this overlooks all the fields that the barrister farmer owns, and he wants to have a very good glazed relationship with it. So that's a very interesting project, really good client, got a great relationship. We're just working through the details now, and he's got a very favorite builder, so that's a really good thing, because we're working with him, the builder, and the structural engineer, and we can get it sorted. Of course, energy comes into this, so we've got heat pumps and so forth, which is pretty not cutting edge exactly, but very challenging.
Alan, can you talk a bit about that now, about what the planners want in 2024? Because I was a bit surprised about that, those points.
Well, funnily enough, the two schemes I'm showing, the one you've just seen and the next one, is going through a process which either doesn't need planning, or you do it through permitted development rights, i.e. the local authority. It comes under the radar, basically.
Right.
It's not.
And
It's not
what's that? That's called a permitted development, is it?
when you can do well. The one in the barn, it's actually a residential barn at the moment, even though it's barely residential. So we're just refurbishing it. So the planners don't get their teeth into it and saying you've got to have 10 car spaces, or you've got to have 5 CV chargers, and you must meet certain standards in terms of energy. We want to do that anyway, not the CV chargers, but the energy. But under permitted development, again, a local authority doesn't get an opportunity to write a check saying, well, if you're doing this, I want you to provide half a school down the road. It's exaggerating, but there are some serious shopping lists going with some planning permissions, because basically development or infrastructure is funded through development, and planners and local authorities need to get funds to do infrastructure projects, and they do it through tasking anybody who wants to do anything. They add a bit of extra so they can get infrastructure built, which is, say, I'm not against it, but cynically sometimes it's over the top, and local authority are not the best users of funds, are they? Let's be fair.
Sure. We know that. We don't want to go into that where we live.
Their quotations are not reasonable, and their timescales off the scale. So
yeah, absolutely. I was thinking you built a small property in your garden, didn't you? But what surprised me there was you had to have an electric car point, you had to have a heat pump source, and a few other things. Which
didn't have to on that one, but I had to have a profile of how we deal with energy. I mean, I just wanted to do it that way because an architect, I wanted to anyway. And it was great because I had a really long garden, or a longer garden, which I didn't want to I didn't want to get the lawnmower out and the hedge trimmer out quite as much. So I was able to, and I managed to have a road at the end of my garden, which I didn't really like the fact that there's a road at the bottom of my garden and at the front of my garden. So I'm apparently I'm a bit further away from that road at the back, and that's always a good thing. The burglars not easily get to my house now.
Well, I remember I was in Waitrose in Guildford, and somebody who lives at the back of my house, who lives about half a mile away from you, was complaining to me about this guy Alan McCulloch who'd was looking for some ridiculous planning permission. That seems to be is that just a Surrey problem, where not in my backyard?
I think Surrey is notorious as a county for people refuse what they don't like, NIMBYism. They don't like this. When they've moved into Surrey, if they haven't, they want to put the gates up, and nobody else can live in Surrey. So it's full now, they're saying, and it really is quite unreasonable. As a planner, architect planner working for clients, I mean, the sorts of comments you get from neighbours and the consultation process. I mean, they're absolutely disgraceful, the things they bring up, and I say I don't crave popularity, frankly, and I'm not popular to the road at the bottom of my garden now, but I never was, so that's fine.
Well, you do get into some pretty tricky negotiations, don't you? First of all with your clients, and then with the planners, and then between husband and wife or partners about what you're going to do, and then presumably you negotiate some pricing with builders as well.
Yeah, it's the builder side is very difficult now because of prices of everything going up, and good builders are just in short supply. Certainly in Britain, certainly in this part of Britain that we live in Surrey, the prices are going up a lot. So all our good builders have gone back to where they live in Poland, don't they? Really?
Well, we'll come on to that, and we'll see what's going on in Texas and in San Francisco a bit later on from some of our other guests on here live. Do we want to talk about permitted developments now and the
Yeah, if you wanted to
slide
show
deck?
that scheme which I'm currently involved with,
Yeah.
it's a sort of that's the last slide, and it's
Do you want me to go to the top of the presentation?
you go to the top and just run through it. Hopefully, people won't. You'll see that everything in white or in grey is existing. And as you get down, you'll see some blue bits appearing, and they're the proposed extensions to be completed under permitted development, i.e. we can do it. We don't need planning for it. We, just for our own peace of mind, will get a certificate of lawfulness, but we're not asking for anybody's opinion. We're not asking neighbours to comment on it, and we can do it. So I think there's another one which is a 3D a bit further up, which shows the whole scheme. Next one. Oh, that's existing 3D, and the next one show. Yes, this one. So you can see the original house in grey and the white in the middle, and on all 4 elevations we're able to add development, so that can become a much larger house. It's in a very, very rural setting, so nobody's overlooking this, and it's got great views, and nobody else is developing that other than the person who lives there. So it's not a speculative development. The couple who live there know exactly what they want, and are very familiar with dealing with builders and delivering. But what's interesting is that a client has, did a beauty parade, had architects do work, and frankly, they were wonderful designs. The problem is, the planners were getting involved. It's a new scheme. They created a situation where they were dictating to the client what he wanted. They had their views on where it should be. This new house should be relocated. They had their views on what standards they should be built to, and it's very invasive. And for people who are self-made people, don't want to be told if they don't need to be. And this can be done very nicely under the control of the owner now. It doesn't need planners and building control officers and environmental health to come on and tell them exactly how everything should be or how it should look.
So with a regular house like yours, Alan, or mine, permitted developments, we can still do something.
We can do some of it. You won't be able to do any development on the front. You can do limited development on the side, subject to your neighbours not being too close. And you can do a reasonable, usually single story, but occasionally a short 2-story part on the back of a house. I mean, this is a house which doesn't have a frontage because it's got a lane from a public road quite a long way away. So it's a house in the round, as it were. So yes, unless you're in a listed building, unless you're in a conservation area, and a few other special situations, you can use permitted development to increase the size of your house.
Okay. Anything else on this before I stop the screen share?
No, it's good.
Okay, that's brilliant. So, where do we go from here? What else do you need to do these days? It seems to be getting planning permissions really difficult, and lots of negotiations between the person that wants it built and the council, I guess.
Well, I think the incoming Labour government next year, from what Sir Keir Starmer's been saying, that he's going to take a bulldozer to Britain and definitely going to achieve 300,000 new homes every year. Whether he achieves that, I mean, that's been a target. What I'm saying is that I think there is a move afoot to take out the democratic process of councils and neighbours being able to refuse the delivery of some developments, whether that's right or wrong. But probably the only way to achieve enough homes in Britain is for it to some fairly significant restrictions to what can be refused and what can't be.
Yeah, but it's always that not in my backyard syndrome, isn't it? Yeah, we agree with that, Alan, but as long as it's not near us, it's okay.
Yeah, I don't like everything. You can imagine as an architect, I go along, oh, I don't like that, I like that, I don't like this. But it's a question of whether it means, whether it's what people want, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely, no, absolutely. Good. So let's keep going on. Interestingly, there's some developments. My pal Godfrey, who's on here, lives very close to Poundbury, and he gave me a trip round Poundbury, and it's amazing. Yeah, Poundbury is owned by well, it's not owned by the king anymore.
Yeah,
It's Prince William or someone runs it for the Crown Estate, but it's an amazing place just outside Dorchester. If anyone hasn't been there, you should take a trip. Take a trip there. And yet we've got sort of these high-rise blocks of flats still going up, as far as I can see, after you know, that dreadful fire in London.
yeah, yeah, Grenfell, yes.
Grenfell Tower, yeah.
I mean, we're next. Guildford is next to Woking, which is, they've had a sort of I've never seen. Well, it's so shocked me the last 10 years how many high-rise blocks of commercial and residential have gone up in Woking, and which is only 4 miles from the centre of Guildford, and it's almost put a shadow on any other high-rise blocks in the, you know, within 20 miles or so. It's apparently they're totally bankrupt, so maybe
Yeah.
it's not working.
No, they are. They are. There's a few questions in the chat box we can deal with, Alan, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, sure.
Alan, can you give us some examples of objections by neighbours? Is one question.
Well, reasonable ones or unreasonable ones?
Both, please. Both.
Well, I mean, most of them are, you know, you can be shot down because it's, oh, it's so difficult. I can't live with all the building work that's going to go on. Well, that's just not it's just not a reason you can give to stop development. But that's almost always the case. And then it's basically, people will often take photographs of how you use the house now, and then say, well, they you know, very personal comments often, saying that you know, these people shouldn't be allowed to extend because of who they are. I mean, they're the worst. I mean, normally it's, you know, it's out of character or something, and a lot of it is, you know, the beauty is in the eye of the beholder. And I think most of the objectors, if they kept to the facts, their views would come over stronger, rather than they do sort of drift into the hyperbole and things which are too personal.
Another question, Alan. With increased cost of housing, are local authorities more relaxed about permission for loft conversions?
Well, they're not really, because loft conversions can be done under permitted development, so they haven't got a say on that. But local authorities are just not delivering enough housing, so they have to be a bit more relaxed, but they can't be, you know, because, for example, it's a fairly conservative or Lib Dem council in Guildford, and you know, they wouldn't be re-elected as councillors if they took a relaxed stance on development. They've got to look tough, and they've got to fight them, and which is why targets aren't being met.
Sure. John says he lives in a designated area, and all permitted development is banned, even the placing of a small shed for him to go down when he's had a party with his wife. Yeah.
I had to put in 15 drawings for a tree house for my grandchildren.
Right, yeah. Then did you get it?
Yes, yeah, but I had to draw roof elevations, balustrading, steps.
That's just the plan of having a bit of fun, making you jump through hoops, isn't it?
I quite enjoyed it, actually. I'm too old to switch to being an architect, but design was quite good. Yeah, climbing walls and slides.
Well, there's
Swings.
not many architects do tree houses anyway, so you're probably on your own.
Yeah, no, it's now going to be converted into a tree drinks house when anybody visits it. So,
That sounds dangerous.
yes.
John's a tough negotiator, Alan, so he probably didn't pay the architect any fees anyway. So, you know, I know him well. Heat pumps is a question. It's a question I'm interested in. Are they, I mean, this isn't a question, but let me ask you, are they any good? Do they work? Do they provide enough heat when there's snow on the ground?
Well, I'll answer it two-part. You know, the industry, the delivery part of heat pumps in this country, in Britain, is not very developed, whereas in other countries, you know, they don't make mistakes. They're right first time. We have a lot of people coming into the market, and they're just not trained. They're not, you know, there's nothing wrong with the technology. Let's put it that way. But basically, we've got the wrong premise. We should retrofit our housing stock, new and old. The trouble is, it's not very sexy, is it? You know, I've lost 2 inches either side of every wall on external walls because I did the walls to insulation. I had to rip up all my floorboards and skirtings because I put underfloor heating because I wanted to do insulation below underfloor heating. So, you know, actually retrofitting is not very sexy, but it's what you need to start with. You know, because nothing works properly unless you've got a proper insulated house in this climate.
Could you compare ground with air pumps? Is ground just too expensive?
Well, ground source heat pumps, you know, are about 3 times the price, basically. And I mean, they are right for certain projects, but not small projects. I mean, they're too expensive. But there are some projects which are so big that you really need to think that way. I haven't actually done a ground source heat pump project. I've done a few air source. Yeah.
Alan, we're nearly out of time, and that's been fascinating. Will you stay on and answer a few more questions in the chat box? But for people on listening to this on the podcast or watching it on YouTube, how do people get hold of you, Alan, if they need a proper architect like you?
I only get referrals, really. I mean, so it's another way of making sure I don't have clients who are too difficult. If they know somebody who's I've done a decent job for, and they recommend me, then I actually that's the best way for me to get new clients.
No, absolutely. And that's the best way for anybody in sales or business in any way at all, getting referrals, isn't it? By doing a fabulous job and then getting referrals.
Well, I've got enough grey hair to get more grey hair. That's for sure.
Alan, thanks for joining us, and we hope you join us again in a while's time so we can review what's been going on in the planning market and the property market, and I'd be interested to see what house prices will do in between now and when we speak again.
Yes, no, it's been great, and I love talking to Tim, because when I sat in one of your sessions about excellence in sport, I absolutely love that presentation.
And for those of you watching, Tim Durkin's a sports specialist expert on motivation and leadership from Dallas in Texas. Good to have you on, Tim. Thanks for joining us. Can I ask members of Monday Night Live to give Alan the usual round of applause?
Thank you.
Alan McCulloch, thanks for joining us today.
Cheers, guys. Thank you.